Oh boy. Better clean up my act now. What does he do for a prayer? Do you have any idea? Any of you?
Hey, is that his own one? I don't know.
This is his own, but we could just do like a
Yeah,
hymn.
All right, we can just do an Ave Maria. Let me get his slides ready to go, and then I'll all right. Okay, back to the classroom. Okay, good morning, everyone. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost, amen. Ave Maria, gratia plena Dominus tecum, benedicta tu mulieribus et benedictus fructus ventris tui, Jesus. Uh, let's see. Our Lady's seat of wisdom is what? Sancta Maria sede sapientiae, ora pro nobis. Mi Patris et Filii Spiritus Sancti, amen. Okay, so how are we all doing today? 5 of you here. I'm not sure I can handle the pressure.
I'm well.
Marianne, nice to see you again. Or not really, partly see half of you. Leo, nice to see you too.
See you.
Thank you for running the audio and the video. Colleen and Bridget, nice to see you as always. So can somebody tell me if I'm correct, according to Dr. What's his name, Corso, that you got through in the president's slides, you got through about 7 or 8 of them, and he wanted me to get through the last, and I will not. I'm going to ask a lot of questions of all of you, so please play ball with me. Please, let's have a talk instead of make this as rigidly boring as possible. And let us also not waste a lot of time on slides and just like have fun for a half an hour, and then you can go home or do whatever, move on to your next phase of your life until I get you again tomorrow. How far did you get in these? I know you can't see them on my screen yet. I will share them with you. But does he give you the slides, or it's just
No, he does a shared screen.
Everything is on Canvas for
Uh-huh.
us. So if we wanted the slides, we could go find them on
No,
Canvas.
I have them. I'm just wondering, like, does he give them to you to follow along, or you all just look at him on the screen as
We
he's
just look at them
talking?
on the screen.
Okay, so let me do the display here. I'm pulling mine out of my Google Drive. So when I share the screen, I have to do something like this. Let's share a window. There we go. Okay, so you should be seeing the big smiling face of the actor, also known as the President Ronald Reagan. Are you all seeing that? Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, they're all actors, aren't they? Really? And everybody can see Ronnie? How about classroom 2, Earth to classroom 2, over?
Yeah.
All right, good. Okay, and I'm backing up. That's an even more obnoxious picture of Teddy Roosevelt. Did you get through him, or must we discuss Teddy Roosevelt?
We went through him, I think. Yeah. We did. Yeah.
We already went through that one.
Oh, lucky all of us. So what in this series of slides, I just want to see kind of for context. It's kind of an odd picture. Anyway, there's the White House. That's where they tried to overthrow the government on January 6th. Articles of Confederation did not create an executive. Did you all talk about Articles of Confederation at all?
We did. We talked about them earlier in the year.
Yeah. Not a prime minister, Federalist Papers, energetic executive. What can I just, to make this a little bit interesting so you really don't sleep and I want to impede your ability to multitask. Do you mind, will it be too obnoxious if I put you on the spot and have each of you tell me something that you learned, or something, not learned, but just some reaction you had to what you've talked about with the presidency up to this point, like up to, we'll start with Reagan. Do you mind if I do that? Is it too annoying for all of you? Should I have Leo start? You're the spokesman, right?
Uh, yeah, I
Let me put my headphones on because you're you're coming in a bit weak. Or if you want, I can start with Janine, who's here.
Oh, sure. Let's start with her.
I'll start with Janine. All right. Well, I kind of want to leave the speakers so that she can hear everybody. But what was your takeaway? I don't remember. Okay. So everything she got from slides. Let's see. Slides. You can all see the screen, right? I see it in the classroom. So that's introduction. Forget that. So we've got presidency, slide 1, 2, early republic, 3, Jackson, 4, Abraham Lincoln, the one of the many antichrists of modern history, 5, Teddy Roosevelt, who was a windbag, and okay, so 5 slides. So what Janine took away from the 5 slides is I don't remember. Excellent. Leo, can you do any better than that? She hasn't set a very high standard.
Uh, the only thing I remember is there was only 45 presidents.
Okay. Yeah, it's kind of like one of those charts. You see these in like Catholic schools and churches. Do you all have like a Pope chart in the school anywhere where it's a huge poster with like the faces of all the popes going back to St. Peter?
No, but we remembered all the first 30 popes,
Uh-huh.
right? 30, yeah. But we
So we
just
had to memorize the first 30 or something like that.
yeah.
Yeah, and honestly, I cannot say I have all of our presidents memorized. Um, and in that middle period, kind of between Jackson and Lincoln, and then up until like World War II, that's where it becomes very foggy for me. Um, but anyway, okay, 45, that's good. Marianne, how about you? Or Bridget? Bridget, are you raising your hand?
Yeah, I can go.
Okay, we have a live participant. This is excellent.
Um, Dr. Corzo compared, I think it was Andrew Jackson to Donald Trump. I remember
Hmm.
doing that. He said he was a man of the people, but they also called him a fascist,
Hmm.
and he was like too nationalist.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good, I think that's a good comparison. Um, so Coco.
All of them, they were all progressives, and so they wanted to make, especially Roosevelt, wanted to make progressive reforms in the state, and he was pretty successful with that.
And um, so what would you how would you define progressive? And when you say all of them, like this, you mean a certain from a certain period or pretty much like everybody that you've discussed up to this point?
Well, Wilson and Roosevelt, because he created the New Deal,
Hmm.
Roosevelt did, and then there was also Lincoln. I don't know about Reagan. I'm pretty sure he was too, but no, he didn't want progressivism, but I mean
Yeah.
before him, the 3 we talked about, they were all progressives.
So can anyone define, even just in very casual terms, progressive, what that means in this
They just
context?
wanted to move forward and become industrial instead of keep like agriculture. They wanted
Uh,
to use machines instead of people for work.
yeah. And what about, okay, so who did we not hear from Marianne so far? And if all you got out of it was what Janine got out of it, that's acceptable. It's not ideal, but it's acceptable.
There's never been a female president.
Never been a female.
Yeah.
Yeah, almost, right? Almost twice, I guess, with our friend Mrs. Clinton, and then um Kamala, and then there's a debate if Mrs. Obama had been elected president, it would still be questionable whether we had a female president, but that's a topic for another day. Um, at least that's what I'm told. I'm just recycle, rumors and gossip. So I guess let's maybe talk about progressive for a minute because this is the problem, the problem with this whole course, not as in Dr. Corso has designed something that is a problem, but the difficulty in presenting all of this is you're getting as much American history as you are civics. And when I hear the term civics, I think of just how does the government work, right? Do you all agree with me on that sort of there's an executive branch, judicial branch, legislative branch, whatever. But all this stuff about the progressives and what both Roosevelts were trying to do. The first one, this guy here who you talked about, so we won't talk about him too much, was a lot of these executives, when they get in power, they're quite full of themselves. They're very impressed with their own authority, and they try to implement policies in a sweeping way. And we do see that even in our current president with the 1,000 executive orders that he's doing, just bang, 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 like I'm in charge, so I'm making all the rules. And they're all like that. That's I think a consequence of the fact that you talk about the Articles of Confederation, that there was no central executive power. So can we talk a little bit about let's start at the beginning. What does the legislative power of government do? Just in like baby steps.
They make the laws.
Correct. And I'm sorry, my audio is kind of like rotten. I'll try to fix it for tomorrow. So if I'm acting like I'm deaf, it's not my ears, it's the machine. But make the laws. Legis comes from law, is Latin for law. So legislature makes the laws. And then the other two branches have some relationship to the law. So can someone just volunteer, perhaps Janine, which one of the branches? Okay, so she said judicial branch, and what does it do? Well, it judges, yeah. So, judicial, that's good. But what's the relationship between the judicial branch and the law? Yes, Colleen.
It upholds the law.
Kind of. I think we'll see that in the executive branch too. Any other spin on that from classroom 1 or classroom 2, perhaps, or from Bridget?
Doesn't it can't it refuse to pass the laws? Can it say that they're not constitutional and then not pass them?
Yeah. Did Dr. Corso ever mention a famous court case with right at the beginning of our history called Marbury versus Madison? Does that ring any bells?
No.
Anyone give us
he did talk
okay.
about that.
Synopsis, Janine, of Marbury versus Madison? I think the opinion, the Chief Justice, anyone know who our first Chief Justice was? In who wrote the Marbury v. Madison opinion? Was John Marshall. Does that sound right? I will get the names wrong potentially because my memory is going, but so in Marbury v. Madison, he has this very famous line in the decision that he issued, saying it's the business of the judicial branch to say what the law is. So Congress passes the law, and as Bridget alluded to, if the law is in some way contrary to the Constitution, then someone can bring a lawsuit that raises that issue, and then the judges will look at it and say, well, we're not supposed to just, there's equal branches of government. This is the theory. Now, it doesn't work like this in practice all the time, most of the time, but the theory is that each branch should respect the power of the other branch. So if Congress passes a law, the other two branches are supposed to just accept it. And that's what Janine said, more like kind of, or Colleen, I guess it was you who said uphold the law, right? The law is what it is. But if the law, let's think of anyone know any stories or any recent news or anything about a law that is being challenged as whether it's constitutional or not? There's a lot of them going on now, but they're all kind of technical. And anybody have any? Well, Nina just said abortion, and it's true. It's hugely controversial, but yeah, I mean, I guess that could be a good example of the current case that overturned Roe versus Wade. So anybody else can think of an example of where the question of whether a law is constitutional has come up, either something from recent news or, whatever you remember is a big deal.
I don't remember.
Say again, Leo.
I said I don't remember.
Okay. That's the same thing. That's what Janine has got out of the course so far. So let's take Roe versus Wade. When you all know, and we'll just look at the time because I do have to get through these slides, but I mean, you can just as well read them off of Canvas too with the notes. By the way, how does Dr. Corso do with like tests and assignments and things? Does he quiz you on what's in the slides, or does he have you write papers? I know he
Well,
did at
he
the
has
beginning.
us do both. He has us write a paper related to whatever he was talking about, and then for the test is kind of random. Like it's from what we're reviewing, but it's not like what you would expect to be on a test. A lot of the times it's like random questions,
Yeah. So
which you
more,
can find in the slides apparently, but I don't find them in the slides.
yes. Well, and I guess more a question of like how much you're getting out of it overall, like the conversation rather than just notes from the slides. But because my goal during our what will seem like an interminable 3 days together is to get you through the material so that you don't get hosed, excuse my sloppy way of speaking, on a test or a quiz, but at the same time, just to talk about stuff that's interesting. And he and the chief boss, Mrs. Loftus, gave me permission to just basically do whatever I want. So, but I do want to make sure you get through the material. So abortion, if I were to say to you that, I mean, you all know, you've heard the phrase Roe versus Wade. It was a court case, and the result of it was someone give me just no right or wrong answer. I'll tell you what the right answer is later, but give me your 3-second take on like what was the upshot of Roe versus Wade. Anyone?
Only the states can say if, like, each individual state can say if they want to make it legal or not.
Yeah, Colleen, that was in fact the opposite. That was what the law was before Roe versus Wade. And so in this example we've been talking about with the question of the judges interpreting the law. Hold on one second. I've got to silence the phone. This is Chloe calling. She's gonna need some urgent information. So I beg your pardon. Yes, dear. No. Yes. Did you hear that? All right. Can you all hear me? I muted it for a sec.
Yeah, we can hear.
Good. Okay. So Colleen just gave us what the law was before Roe versus Wade. And this is a good illustration, as I was saying, of how the courts get involved in. Let me turn this screen share off for a second because I don't want to stare at Roosevelt's face. I'm handsomer than Teddy Roosevelt. Nina doesn't. Nina's saying, but anyway, the state of the law before was that each state decided what things were criminal, and this is typical. Like in our federal system, I'm sure Dr. Corso talked to you about that. The idea is the states are kind of their own little sovereignties; they're their own kingdoms, and then they come together for certain reasons. That was the theory going from Articles of Confederation to the United States. Was you had individual governments who kind of united and agreed, okay, well, we're going to surrender certain powers because we need to. You can't have Delaware have an army and Florida have an army and North Carolina have an army because it's too inefficient. And if the Chinese ever try to bomb us to smithereens, we need a big federal army to, defend ourselves. That was the theory. Part of the theory also was whatever we don't need to do in common, we will keep to ourselves. So if you have two families, say, well, we'll go on vacation. Are we going to eat in common? Are we going to have the same hotel room, whatever? No. We'll agree to travel together. We'll do one potluck. The Loftuses will bring a pasta salad. Leo will bring some chop suey. Marion will bring some pancit. Nina will bring hummus, and I'll bring hot dogs. But other than that, we're eating separately. Buy your own dinners, your own meals, your own everything. That's sort of the Constitution. And I'm giving you a silly example on purpose because in practice it has panned out in sometimes very silly ways. The original concept of abortion was whether a woman can abort her child in her womb was a question for the state. Does the state want to make this criminal? And if it happens, could you get reported to the district attorney or the police and then get charged with the crime, et cetera, et cetera. In the 70s, early 70s, someone challenged that and said, no, I have a constitutional right to abort my fetus. Namely, the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, the Sixth Amendment, the Eighth Amendment, all these kind of amendments that involve human rights give me this sort of overall control over my own body. So I can, even though my child is not really my body, he's in my body, but he's not my body, or whatever the argument is. And all the judges fell for that and said, okay, since we, according to John Marshall, have the power of saying what the law is, we are deciding that what the Constitution means is that the woman's right to privacy, that's the term that they used, makes it improper, not criminal, but makes it wrong, unconstitutional for any state to make procuring or providing an abortion illegal, to make that criminal, because there's a right guaranteed by the federal government for a woman to have an abortion. And since the federal government is higher than the state governments are not allowed to make this criminal. So, it's interesting because the Marbury v. Madison case, where John Marshall said it's our job to say what the law is, you can see that in the Roe versus Wade context, they're kind of going beyond that. They're not taking a law that was passed by Congress and saying, in order for this law to be constitutional, it has to be interpreted in a certain way. So we are telling you what Congress meant when they passed this law. That's really the chief role of the judges, is to read the laws passed by Congress and say, here's what they mean. The same as you're all Catholics, of course. So any of you like to read technical dogmatic theology manuals on the side in your free time? And don't feel ashamed to admit it. I know most of you do. So, there's it's not a question of humility. Just spit it out. In those manuals, you'll have the theologians explain the Catholic faith to us. We all know the creed. We know the Our Father. We took catechism as little kids. We know that Our Lady was assumed into heaven. Jesus Christ rose from the dead, basic things like that. But the Catholic Church is full of books and books and books and books that explain what all these doctrines mean. And that's really what the judges do in our system, is they have a book of the laws, or in our case, many, many, many books. And if there's a controversy that involves what does this law actually mean, it's their job to explain it and to construe the law, the term construe coming from construction, like what construction do you put on a certain phrase or a certain sentence. So they looked at the Constitution. Did Dr. Corso go over amendments with you in the beginning? So tell me, like, what comes to mind if I say Fourth Amendment? Anything come to mind other than I don't remember? Some people think all the amendments say I don't remember, but Fourth Amendment, anyone? Peeler? That's from an old movie. Nobody. Fourth Amendment. Fourth Amendment. There's
protecting.
Go ahead.
Like, is it protect the people?
Yeah, I mean, they all kind of protect the people, but Fourth Amendment involves search and seizure. Like, if you're just minding your own business, walking down the street, can the police just come up and ransack, go through your pockets and your purse? I never let a man go through my purse, I can tell you that. But especially not a cop, and especially if I haven't done anything wrong. So that's called search and seizure. And it was a big deal in the British era, pre-colonial times, like late early 1700s. The Americans in the mid 1700s felt that was one of the abuses of the British government, was kind of randomly, pulling people over, so to speak, and just going through their trunk. And so they said, Fourth Amendment, no search and seizure without probable cause. So if you're swerving all over the road and there's just like waves of the smell of gin like wafting behind your car and people hiccuping in the front seat, well, then, yeah, the cop can pull you over and go through your trunk and say, wow, there's a half-drunk case of gin in the back and you have an open bottle, on the seat. If you're just totally minding your own business, driving straight, minding the speed limit, perfect form, A+ on the driving test, even if he pulls you over and kind of forces you to get out of the car and finds an entire I don't even know I can show you how innocent I am. I don't know what the baggies are called that they put cocaine in, but let's say a packet. If he finds an entire pallet of cocaine packets in your trunk, there's nothing anyone can do with that, because that would be called an unlawful or unreasonable search and seizure. He's not allowed to just go through your stuff just because he's fishing for criminals. So there's numerous amendments like that. It's a little bit like, anyone ever heard the Ten Commandments divided into kind of two sections? Nina's nodding. And what are the two sections broadly? Classroom number two, Houston. Two sections of, just like the two divisions. Don't care about the numbers. Anybody? Marion, do you remember the two sections of the commandment?
Was it that one part of the law is like about loving God?
Yeah. Yep. And what's the other part?
Um,
I could tell you were going to get it right. Even though you're only like as big as my thumbnail on the computer. What is so loving God, correct? And then you remember when our Lord tells one of his, not disciples, but someone who comes up to him and says, well, what are the commandments? And our Lord says, well, I'll sum them up in this: love God with your whole heart. That's sort of the first part of the commandments. What's the second part?
Love others.
What's that, Leo?
I said love others.
Yeah. I mean, basically, it's like how we interface with God and how we interface with other people. And in a way, the amendments are the same. So First Amendment, for example, is supposed to protect our right to practice our religion, to speak freely, to get together in groups, to protest, to write to the government, to complain, all the stuff that kind of we want to do ourselves that protects our right to do that. And Second Amendment, right to have weapons. Third Amendment, I don't remember because you never talk about it. And then the fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, kind of like the second tablet of the commandments, all is telling the government what they can't do to us. Now, the First Amendment is phrased in the same way. It says the government shall not make laws, blah, blah, blah. But it's basically to empower us to do things, whereas the Fourth, Fifth, Sixth, Seventh Amendments are what the government can't do. So to go back to our Roe versus Wade and how the judiciary is supposed to, all the branches of government are supposed to do good things. And in theory, it's like a nice system. My belief, I don't know what Dr. Corso's take on this is, but he said I could say whatever I want, so I will take advantage of that option. It's a dangerous thing to tell me, as those of you who know me. But there are good things that are done kind of in individual cases, but in general, the system doesn't work the way it's supposed to work on paper. Maybe we can talk about that tomorrow, the next day, if we ever get through the slides. We can maybe even skip the slides for today. Just pretend like we're having a field trip and then get to the slides tomorrow. Plow through them all in 10 minutes. Back to Roe versus Wade. Fundamentally, the judiciary is supposed to say, what does this law mean? And does this law comport with the Constitution? They kind of did that. But they looked at the amendment that says the cops can't pull you over for no reason. That's Fourth Amendment. The Fifth Amendment is what we call the Due Process Amendment. Fifth Amendment is, I'll give you a local example. If Leo is called, for the 20th time this year to the principal's office because he's misbehaving in class, and they say, okay, you're suspended now. You're going to have a whole week of no school. We're going to fine you $100, and you have to clean the bathrooms for the rest of the year. And they just like dump that on him. And he gets home and his parents are like, oh, son, it's just a saying. We're so embarrassed. What did you do? And he says, I don't know. They didn't tell me what I did. That's the essence of the Fifth Amendment. Before you are deprived of life, liberty, doesn't say property, but it includes property. In other words, before you get a fine, before you get put in jail, before they put you to death for murder, whatever, you have to be provided with due process of law. That's what the Fifth Amendment says. And due process means they have to tell you what you did wrong. They have to give you a chance to examine all the evidence against you. They have to give you a chance to understand, well, what's the government's theory? Like, why are you saying I did something wrong? For example, we'll go back to Leo in the principal's office. Said, well, you were shooting spitballs at Marion because you sit behind her and you're trying to bounce these like paper-soaked spitballs off the back of her head. And he could say, well, did you have a straw? Yes. Were you putting saliva on your paper? Yes. Were you putting it in the straw? Yes. Were you shooting it at Marion? No. Well, what do you mean? Like there's spitball stuck in her hair. Well, we were on the way to PE and they told me to practice shooting at a target that was just on the other side of Marion's head. And I was just shooting at the target and that, I said, well, I'm going to hit her. I don't want to do that. I'm very charitable, a good Catholic. I'm not going to shoot spitballs in a woman's hair unless she, certain exceptions probably should be made, but not Marion. And they said, no, just do it. This is the assignment in class. So her hair is full of spitballs. And then they accuse Leo of, you were shooting spitballs at her hair. They lay out all the evidence. Well, even that violates the Fifth Amendment because the Fifth Amendment says in so many words that you have to be told what is the government's theory as to why you committed this crime. You can't just get the straw, the spitballs, Marion's hair samples, photos. The government has to explain, how do we know that you were doing this on purpose in order to injure her or wound her or make her unhappy? That's Fifth Amendment. Sixth Amendment is like you have a right to a lawyer, you have a right to a fair trial. Seventh, I kind of don't remember because I never talk about seventh. Eighth Amendment is the cruel and unusual punishment. If they, if you don't pay your bills on time, they can't rack you or, carve your guts out like they did to Catholics in Elizabethan England. Maybe they can put you in jail. Maybe they can send you a bill, pay $1,000 fine. But somehow the judiciary, in looking at this law, I don't even remember what state the Roe v. Wade case came from, but in looking at the criminal law, it was probably California, that criminalized or made illegal procuring an abortion, getting an, whether the woman gets the abortion or the, family helps her, or the doctors, etc. The judges looked at these other amendments we talked about: due process, no search and seizure, no cruel punishment, right to a trial, and they said, oh yeah, all that stuff together also means that a woman's privacy is such that she should be able to abort her child. And I am not kidding you that if you read the Roe v. Wade decision, that's what it says. It says you read all these things and they say, well, the founding fathers must have meant that everything is so private to people that the half of the human race that happens to be female, those that conceive a child, can murder the child in their womb because, no search and seizure that's unreasonable, due process, no cruel and unusual punishment, right to a trial. So when the I don't even remember the name of the case now, within the last year, right, that Roe v. Wade got overturned, right? Or a couple years, maybe. Nina was saying a couple years ago. And everyone's up in arms like, oh, this is all Trump is imposing, Christianity on the whole nation and he's out of control. All the court did was look at Roe v. Wade. I could tell, at least Coco, I didn't put you to sleep yet. You were chuckling or whatever at how odd the court decision was in Roe v. Wade, the way I explained it. And all the court did this time around was say, that's kind of dumb. If the state wants to make abortion criminal, it's probably something that the state has to regulate. So you have states like California, I presume a bunch of them in New England, some liberal states in the middle of the country who for them abortion is fine and they allow it. And the next question really is there somewhere in the Constitution a right to life that also protects the unborn? Because if we could ever get to that stage, then the judges, if they were doing their job, would say, every state that criminalizes abortion, those laws are protected by the Constitution. Like the Constitution protects the unborn, and so any law that protects the unborn is completely fine, and it's totally consistent with the Constitution. I don't know personally. I don't think we'll ever get there in this country. But that's the whole mechanism whereby the judiciary is supposed to scrutinize laws, interpret the Constitution, apply the Constitution to the laws that exist, whether they come from the states or at the federal level from Congress. And the transition, I can let you go a bit early unless you insist on, sticking around. You can study the slides if I let you go now, catch up on your other homework, get a quick snooze. What we've done, I guess, is kind of outline the judicial power so that you can put the executive in context, since we're going to talk about the executive. The legislative power, whoever said, was it you, Colleen, who said they make the laws, or Bridget? I mean, that's pretty much the case. That's kind of a no-brainer. And then, so this will be like the 2 minutes, 3 minutes on the executive branch to get us in context for tomorrow and the next day. Somebody said, and please refresh my memory at the very beginning, like when we said, what does the judiciary do? We've talked about what they actually do. Somebody said, well, they uphold the law. Do you remember who said that? I'm not trying to call you out or anything, but
Yeah, I said that.
okay. So you can see how in one way what you were driving at is true because it's the judges that are supposed to interpret the law and basically make rulings based on their best understanding of what the law is. There is, however, and I noticed this, I think in one of Dr. Corso's slides, I'll find it for you tomorrow if it's relevant, that the article, he talked about the articles of the Constitution, right? 1, 2, and 3, like the three big, I mean, there's other little ones, but those are the ones that make the three branches of government. Article 1, Congress, Article 2, President, Article 3, Judiciary. So Article 2, there's a famous phrase in Article 2 that says the president shall see that the laws be faithfully executed. That is his job, is not to make the laws. His job is not to interpret the laws. His job is to take the laws as they exist on the books and as they are interpreted by the judiciary and then carry them out. So what you said, Coco, about, upholding, that applies to the president too. Like it's his job to follow whatever the law is. Now, when we get into our slides, let me just read. I'm not going to put the screen share on, but we've got Reagan and then, oh my Lord, a whole cast of moronic people and then Trump. So what you find, I mean, for a large period of our history is that when the president doesn't like the law, he will, everyone remember, did Dr. Corso ever show you the little cartoon? I'm just a bill on Capitol Hill. Anyone ever seen that? Okay, so that's what I grew up with when they just invented the television. And there's a little cartoon of a little guy, a little piece of paper with legs, and he's walking around the Congress building, and he's explaining to his audience with a little song how he goes from a bill, which is just something written up, by some legislator, to a law, and it's kind of cool because it gives you the process, and it is accurate. But anyone know what the last step is? Like, what's the last thing that has to happen for a law that is proposed by Congress to actually become, real and sort of enforceable? Last step. It's kind of an easy one.
Doesn't the president have to okay it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if he doesn't okay it, what do we call that? Classroom 2 over? Houston? Veto, right. And then what happens if the Congress gets upset and says, I don't care about your stinking veto, I want this law to be passed anyway? Can they do that?
They vote, and if 2/3 of them vote for that it's going to be passed, it gets passed.
Colleen, you're hogging all the right answers. Anyway, correct. So there's this balance, between we want the law passed and we insist on it. And so if enough people, they override the veto and then it becomes a law. If the president doesn't like the law, and President Bush, the second one, did this, he was probably my least favorite of numerous of our recent presidents, but I don't like any of them. He used to do what they call signing statements, and I'll just leave you with this thought. This is a little bit like, we'll take Coco's facial expression from my explanation of Roe v. Wade. Hopefully we'll get the same reaction. President will sign a paper saying, okay, I passed this law, but I think the law from Article 1 of the Constitution come from Congress. I think this law is encroaching on the power of the executive. Give you one quick example. Congress passes a law, said we don't want any more wars, anywhere outside of our borders, where the military is allowed to fight inside the country. Like if we're attacked, we can defend ourselves, but we're not going to allow the military to go around the other side of the globe and like blow up small Arab villages just because it makes the Israelis happy. If Congress tried to pass a law like that, the thought of that ever happening is it's almost out of the question because the congressmen would all be shot before that happens. But assuming they did, one of the things that this is this technique that President Bush used to use, he'll sign a paper saying, yeah, I acknowledge that Congress wrote this law, but it infringes upon my power as the commander-in-chief under Article 2. So I do not believe that the law is constitutional, and I do not intend to follow it. And he would literally write, I do not intend to follow it because of my interpretation of the Constitution, showing, number one, he's making himself into a judge because it's their job to decide what's constitutional or not. And number two, violating the terms of the Constitution, which says your job, Mr. President, is to faithfully execute the laws. So That's what our modern presidency has turned into. And I hope that gets us all super intrigued for next week. And I promise to give you some time back so you have 150 seconds. Review the slides if you would, if you can get them on Canvas. Review the last few of the president section, and then we have to do judiciary. We've talked a ton about the judiciary, so that's going to be super easy. But we'll do the president stuff tomorrow. The judges on Wednesday, Thursday, whatever the day is, and but come with your questions. Come with just intriguing, gripping questions, so we can take these 40 minutes and make them, exciting and enjoyable. And no spitballs, Leo.
Thank you.
Okay. God bless you all. Goodbye.
Always a